thank you for each and every one of you being here for our meeting, our media overview of the NAEP scores. As we know, that's the nation's report card, as stated. This year, I don't think it was scores that we did not anticipate nationally with school closures that occurred during the pandemic and then trying to get students back. The time of which a random sampling of fourth graders and eighth graders in both reading and math occurred was in January of 2022. That was just when Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools was getting our students back into a cadence, back into the schoolhouse. Prior to that, it had been a sort of a hybrid type of instruction. So the timing of the random testing for fourth graders, eighth graders occurred in January. One factor that you would know that we have strategized is making sure students are in attendance each and every day and pushing hard on that to cut down on chronic absenteeism. We know for a fact that there's no way that we'd be able to determine the students that were randomly selected, whether they were in school each and every day or were they not attending. We don't know that. But I would say this, in December, it's quite apropos that the Board of Education established the 4 goals, the guardrails, and I think they're a driving force that will take us forward and ensure that our students will be achieving at the necessary levels that we expect in the community and as the board expects in our reading and math. Goal 1, reading, 3rd grade, that will impact our 4th graders in the future when they take the NAEP test. We're looking hard at Math 1. We're focusing on our 8th graders in preparation for Math 1. As everyone knows, about 30% plus of our students take Math 1 as 8th graders. And so with our focus there in Math 1, I think we'll see great dividends in the future as well. We're looking at pushing our kids to take high-level coursework at the high school level later, but it's really the 4th and 8th that we're looking at in preparation. So I think the board has set a good standard for us, and I think that as we keep our focus on the North Carolina standards that we follow in our curriculum for reading and math, that we'll achieve much higher results in the future. It's unfortunate that the nation had to go through the pandemic and shut down schools the way we did and then come back. But I think it demonstrates the importance of a quality teacher in every classroom, having students in attendance and engaged in learning, and parents supporting that. And Charlotte is getting ready to go out for a bond referendum. I think it emphasizes the importance of having a brick and mortar school that our students can go to that's safe and a positive environment for them each and every day, and that will be happening in 2023. So we're very fortunate to have Dr. Frank Barnes, who's very engaged with TUDA and NAEP and understands this very well. He's been in the business here for 10 years as our Chief Accountability Officer. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barnes, and he will give you the slide presentation. So Dr. Barnes, I hand it off to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hannibal. And thank you to members of the media. What I'm going to walk you through is a presentation that has 5 parts. The first, I'm going to walk you through some basics about NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, just so you understand some of those things. I want to give you a brief national snapshot. That'll be the second part. The third part will be the most in-depth part around how did Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools do on NAEP assessments in reading and mathematics grades 4 and 8. Then we'll talk about putting those things in a longitudinal perspective, a historical perspective, to let you look at NAEP results over time. Then last, we'll talk about some key elements of what we're doing to accelerate our students' recovery, and then we'll take questions from there. So the National Assessment of Educational Progress, as Mr. Hadabaugh said, is also coined as the nation's report card, is administered every 2 years, or it's a biennial assessment, and it's done just in reading and mathematics for this national reporting element. There are some other subjects that are in off years, and they focus on 4th grade and 8th grade. Not every student in every school, every district, or every state takes the NAEP assessments, but a purposeful sample to make sure that you have a good mix of EC students, English learners, as well as different students from different racial demographics and income backgrounds. Oftentimes, or most customarily, the results are only reported at the national level and state levels. However, there is a provision in federal legislation that allows a certain number of school districts, or a certain set of school districts, not number, set of school districts, to over-test so you can get district level results. And that is called the Trial Urban District Assessment, or TUDA. TUDA has been going on since 2002. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools has been participating as a TUDA participant since 2003. There are 26 districts that participated in this last administration, as Mr. Hadabah said, in the winter of 2022. These are the districts that are participants. If I were to include Fresno, there would be 27, but Fresno did not participate in testing for whatever reason in 2022. Each of these districts are part of the Council of Great City Schools, and that is part of the eligibility requirement to be able to apply. I think we should be acknowledged that not all districts choose to participate in TUDA, but we're one of the ones who've started from the beginning to make sure that we could say more about how our students are doing compared to our state, compared to the nation. This is a geographic spread, so you can see in the map, there's only two districts in the state of North Carolina that can participate in NAEP testing and be a TUDA participant, Guilford County Schools and our own. I believe Guilford has been participating for the last couple of administrations. Something about the scores. And once again, this is all context for you. I don't expect you to roll this, but just this context is there's different levels of explanation of the results. States, schools, and then TUDA participants will have scale scores from 0 to 500 to kind of give you a sense of what, and based on that scale score, there'll be one of 4 different achievement levels. You have below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced. For the sake of this conversation, to align with our local expectations, we talk about the percent at or above proficient. And that's how we'll be framing the rest of this presentation. We talk about Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools results. To give you a sense of what the scale scores represent next to the achievement levels, you can see the basic, proficient, and advanced. And going from left to right, grade 4 through 8 reading and grade 4-8 mathematics, you can see the scale scores that are associated with certain performance bands. Notice the NAEP I think you can't see my cursor, that's okay. If you look to the middle band NAEP proficient and go all the way to the far right column, you'll see that this proficient represents solid academic performance on each NAEP assessment, as opposed to basic, which would be partial mastery. So let's look at a national picture of how the nation did on this National Assessment of Educational Progress. Alongside normal NAEP testing, the National Center for Education Statistics, which is the organization which is part of the U.S. Department of Education which oversees NAEP testing, does a long-term trend assessment. They've been doing that in reading since 1971 and in mathematics since 1973. On the long-term trend assessment, and this is for 9-year-olds, which are customary like 4th grade, but 9-year-olds, what you see here is that from one administration to the next, 2020 to 2022, we had the largest drop in reading as a nation since 1990. Just want to let that sink in. The largest drop in reading scores since 1990 as a country. When looking at mathematics, not only did we have the biggest drop, but we had the first ever score drop in mathematics ever since 1973 as a country. That's to put things in a national perspective of the impact of the pandemic that it's had no matter what your jurisdiction, whether you be in a large city or somewhere in another part of a state. Also wanted to share these data points for the nation. So what we know is nearly every jurisdiction saw declines in the percentage of students at or above proficient in reading in 2019. Also, what we know in mathematics is that no jurisdiction across the 51 states and territories saw any gains in mathematics. They all had a decline, I think except with 1 or 2 exceptions, which were level. So we're seeing it's a national impact. But I thought I wanted to also share this quote. I could have paraphrased this quote, but I thought it was meaningful to share. And it's from Peggy Carr, who's commissioner of the National Center for Educational Statistics. And this is the one thing I'll read from you, and I quote, "The results show the profound toll on student learning during the pandemic, as the size and scope of the declines are the largest ever in mathematics. The results also underscore the importance of instruction and the role of schools in both students' academic growth and their overall well-being. It's clear we need to come together, policymakers and community leaders at every level, as partners in helping our educators, children, and families succeed, end quote. I think that Dr. Carr said it well, and so I thought it would be appropriate to share those sentiments to give you a national picture of what's happening. But now let's look at how this all translates to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. To say it briefly, and then I'll walk you assessment through assessment, we finished amongst the 26 tutor participants who participate in the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 5th and 4th grade reading, 4th and 8th grade reading, 5th in 4th grade mathematics, and 1st in grade 8 mathematics. That's where we stood against the nation. Allow me to walk you through with more specificity how we did on specific scale scores and percentages. What you see here going from left to right, and this will be the format for every one of these slides, you see Charlotte, you see Guilford, our other North Carolina tutor participant, the statewide average, the large city average, that's the average of the 26 districts that participate in TUTA, and the national public school average. This would not include private schools. And so you see here the percent of students at or above proficient, and you can see that we're above Guilford, above the state average, above the large city average, and above the national public average. What this looks like visually from going from right to left, or my left to your right, largest to smallest, you can see we were outpaced by Austin, San Diego, Miami-Dade County, and Hillsborough County, which is the Tampa Bay area. But you do see we're above the national public average, which is in green, North Carolina, which is in green, and the large city average. This is, again, grade 4 reading. Grade 8 reading, we still outpace large cities and the state of North Carolina average, and is on par with the national public schools. So you can see, once again, above Guilford, above the state, and right on par with the national public average. What this looks like visually, you can see we're outpaced again by 2 Florida districts, Hillsborough County and Miami-Dade, as well as San Diego, but we're right there with the national public average, the state of North Carolina, and the large city average. Let's transition to mathematics. In 4th grade mathematics, you can see we're right on par with the national public average, this North Carolina state average, a little bit above Guilford and a little bit above the large city average. Here you can see we're just below that, and this is what it looks like visually, outpaced by 3 Florida districts, Miami-Dade, Hillsborough, and Duval County, as well as Austin, Texas. But we're right there with the North Carolina state average, the national public average, and the large city average. Let's go from grade 4 math to grade 8 math. You can see here we outpace our partner Guilford, the state average, the large city average, and the national public average. What that looks like visually is here is where the district was able to hold its ground and be first among the TUTA average, but still the TUTA's district participants, but still be above the state average, the national public average, and the large city average. For those of you who either look at the electronic version of this or have the hard copy, what we've done is to be able to put those percentages in one slide for you so you can make easy reference of that. But I think as we look at these things in a national context, it's also important to be able to look through things through historical context. And so we wanted to share some results with you dating back to our first administration in 2003 for each of those 4 tested areas and grades. So what you see here going from left to right, and in my haste, I forgot my glasses, so I'm gonna look down the screen because I can't actually see that far, so I apologize. But if you go to my right, your left, that's 2003, the first time CMS participated in NAEP as a tutor participant, all the way down to 2022. And what you're able to see here is that in 2023, I'm gonna try to, there you go. Okay, you can see right here that we were at 31% at or above proficient, and we're now at 33. You can see the state went from 33 to 32. They dropped slightly. The large city, you'll see as across all the areas, they started at 19%, and they're gaining ground on us, but they're at 26, and you can see the state closely increased. So although at least one media outlet said that we were the lowest scores ever, if you look across all 4, that is not necessarily the case, as these results show. Here's 8th grade reading. Once again, this is 2003 on my far right, your left, down to 2022. You can see Charlotte, when you look at the percent at or above proficient, we were at 30, and we're down slightly to 29. The state of North Carolina went from 29 down to 26. The large city average has increased. They started at 19, they're up to 26, and you can see as a nation, went from 30 to 29. This is what Dr. Carr was referring to as the impact on the nation, that when you look over time, the impact of what the pandemic has had has caused those results to decline. Now, mathematics in grade 4 is an area we had our biggest challenge caused by the pandemic, as reflected in these results when compared to our peers. 4th grade mathematics, as you can see here, where we were in 2003 to where we're 2022, we went from where we had 41% at or above proficiency down to 35, which represented the largest decline administration to administration, which was from 49 to 35, 14 percentage points. This was our biggest decline, and our declines were greater than our peers. You can see the state of North Carolina went from 41 to 35, approximately the same type of decline, but not the same year over year, which was 41 to 35. The large cities went from 20 to 26, once again gaining ground on us, and the national public average, they managed to make progress, although they declined from 40 to 35, which is the decline that you mentioned earlier for the 9-year-olds. Here where you see when we transitioned from 4th grade mathematics to 8th grade mathematics, you can see our declines were less than our peers. And so you can see here, we did go from 32 to 30, which was about a 6 percentage point gain, but you can see the state of North Carolina went from 32 to 25% at proficiency. The large city went from 16, they've gone up, but only up to 21. And the nation took a step back from 27 to 26. So this is ability for us to think about the administrations over the length of time that the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools have been participating. So once again, in some instances, yes, we are below where we were in 2003, but in other instances, you can see that's just factually not accurate. And we wanted to be able to present the data so that other media outlets could see those results. So what are we doing as far as our recovery efforts? There are 4 things we want to point out, and these are not all that we're doing, but they're 4 important elements of things that we are doing to accelerate our academic recovery. Number 1 is we're monitoring where our students are. We monitor them 3 times a year to see where they are with their foundational skills, and that's as a complement to other assessments we do to see how they're doing with the standards they need to master and be expected to exhibit mastery of on end of grade and end of course assessments. But based on those data, we're not just collecting data, we're acting on the data. And at the school level and the classroom level, they're adjusting their schedules, whether it be during the school day or during the week or even during the quarter or year, to make sure that students get opportunities not just for enriched support to master standards, but also to get additional supports in small group settings to develop their foundational skills. Because that's where we saw some of the erosion during the pandemic, is students' foundational skills to master standards is where we began to erode. So we're modifying and using those data to get kids what they need as soon as we know they need it. We're also, as a part of that, are implementing a multi-tiered system of supports, making sure that our students not only are screened, not only are getting more enrichment in their regular classroom, but if they need interventions in reading or mathematics that is taking place, and they're getting the full complement of that intervention to accelerate their improvement. And if that doesn't work, to then even go to more intensive supports where it could be one-on-one or other efforts to help accelerate their learning. We're also trying to build in our out of school time to make sure there's opportunities for tutoring both during the school day and after the school day. And in some instances, we're using CMS teachers to do that. And in other instances, we're using outside partners to do that. And our ESSER funds, our elementary and secondary emergency relief funds that we've gotten from the federal government are directly aligned to these strategies to help accelerate our academic progress. Once again, this isn't all we're doing, but there are 4 key strategies that I think it notes merit. So in sum, do we have work to do? We certainly have work to do. The gaps that we see between our subgroups and the disparities we see did not start with the pandemic, but they were exacerbated by the pandemic. But we're well situated, making our investments to help our students make as speedy and full an academic recovery as possible. We are not seeking in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools under Interim Superintendent Hadabaugh's leadership. We're not trying to get back to normal. We're trying to get back to better and help our students do better and accelerate their recovery as fast as they possibly can.